Donald Trump has been mad at you for a very long time.
Over a decade.
Over a decade.
Yes. And he said, just want you to know, I've forgiven her. And this young woman, I'm like, what is he, the pimp?
It's been really, we've sort of made the joke on the show that he's flip-flopped on everything except you.
It's actually very true.
Trump is the worst thing that ever happened to the United States. Those weren't my words, they were Rosie O'Donnell's opening line that sent Trump into an absolute meltdown. What followed was a comedy massacre that has psychiatrists nodding in agreement. Watch as we analyze this viral moment frame by frame, showing exactly how Rosie exposed Trump's thin skin with surgical precision. If you've ever wondered why comedians seem to get under his skin more than serious politicians, this video will show you the psychological warfare happening beneath the jokes. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now back to the video. The feud between Rosie O'Donnell and Donald Trump wasn't just another celebrity spat, it was comedy warfare that drew first blood back in 2006. When Trump decided not to fire Miss USA Tara Conner over her partying ways, Rosie went on The View and unleashed a comedy assault that would haunt Trump for years to come. He's not a self-made man, Rosie told the millions watching at home. His father gave him a whole bunch of money. He's been bankrupt so many times. He's like one of those snake oil salesmen.
And did it sort of start? It started from The View, yes?
The View.
Yeah.
And she's the prostitute. And who is he? He's the moral arbiter of 20-year-old behavior now, right? So then I said, some facts that I just went on Wiki. There was a Tara O'Connor, I believe her name was, a young Irish lass who was Junior Miss Trump Atlantic City pageant sexist winner that were easily accessible since this campaign began, that he is bankrupt 4 times, that he got all his money from his father.
And just like that, Rosie did something few had dared. She attacked the golden image Trump had spent decades polishing. While politicians tiptoed around Trump's business record, Rosie charged straight at it with a bulldozer and a megaphone. She waved her arms mimicking Trump's distinctive speaking style and delivered the knockout punch. He's not a legitimate businessman, he plays one on TV. The studio audience roared with laughter, but somewhere in New York, Trump was most definitely not laughing. What made Rosie's takedown so powerful wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. She didn't use complicated political language or boring economic statistics. She delivered brutal one-liners that regular folks could understand and repeat around the water cooler. He's like the big dumb bully on the playground, she quipped, turning the supposedly mighty Trump into a cartoon character. The View gave Rosie something Twitter couldn't back then, a massive platform with millions of women viewers who trusted her. Every morning, coffee cup in hand, they'd watch Rosie tear into Trump's carefully constructed facade, exposing the cracks for all to see. This wasn't just entertainment, it was demolition work on Trump's public image. When videos circulated of Trump listening to Rosie's comments, body language experts had a field day. His face would transform in real time, jaw clenching, nostrils flaring, that signature pout intensifying to dangerous levels. One psychologist later noted this as classic narcissistic injury, when someone with an inflated self-image faces criticism they can't handle. But the moment that truly broke Trump's composure came when Rosie called him a cruel criminal and mentally unstable man on The View. The clip shows Trump's face contorting through a journey of emotions. First the eyebrow twitch, then the grimace, followed by that distinctive reddening that creeps up from his collar. For a man obsessed with looking strong and in control, these involuntary reactions were devastating. Trump's handlers reportedly begged him to ignore Rosie's jabs, but he couldn't help himself. "When somebody hits me, I hit back harder," he told Fox News, unknowingly admitting that Rosie's words had landed exactly where they hurt most. His inability to let it go revealed something crucial about Trump's psychology, a thin-skinned nature that couldn't handle being the butt of a joke, especially from a woman comedian. While serious journalists wrote lengthy profiles examining Trump's business practices, Rosie cut through the noise with simple observational comedy that stuck in people's minds. She didn't need fact-checkers or investigative teams. She just needed to point out what was already visible. The emperor's new clothes weren't fooling everyone. While politicians bounced off Trump like rubber bullets, Rosie's comedy penetrated like armor-piercing rounds. The man who coolly dismissed senators and foreign leaders was somehow reduced to firing off unhinged tweets about a comedian at 3 in the morning. Turns out the mighty Trump had a self-destruct button all along, and Rosie O'Donnell knew exactly where to find it. What's truly fascinating is how differently Trump handles political opponents versus comedians. Watch footage of Trump in debates with seasoned politicians. He maintains a strange kind of composure. Sure, he interrupts and makes faces, but there's a calculated method to his madness. Now compare that to any clip where he's asked about Rosie O'Donnell. The difference is stunning. His face flushes, his words tumble out in angry bursts, and all strategic thinking flies out the window. Rosie's comparison of Trump to a tantrum-throwing toddler wasn't just a throwaway insult. It was psychological warfare that triggered a spectacular meltdown. The more she pushed this particular button, the more Trump proved her point. Her characterization cut so deep because it undermined the very image he'd spent decades constructing. The powerful, unshakable businessman who always wins. The evidence of Trump's obsession appeared in his Twitter feed at the strangest hours. While presidents and prime ministers were presumably sleeping, Trump was rage tweeting about Rosie at 3 a.m., revealing just how deeply she'd gotten under his skin. These weren't carefully crafted political messages. They were emotional outbursts full of personal attacks that no communications director could spin into presidential behavior. What made Rosie particularly effective was her tactical brilliance in using Trump's own language against him. When Trump proclaimed himself a very stable genius, most politicians responded with policy critiques. Rosie simply took those words and turned them into comedy gold, highlighting the absurdity of someone who melts down over a comedian's jokes, claiming exceptional stability. Her mockery resonated because it pointed out what everyone could see but many wouldn't say. Perhaps most damaging was how Rosie's comedy exposed Trump's inability to laugh at himself. Even Trump's supporters began noticing this glaring weakness. When a politician can't take a joke, it reveals something concerning about their character, a brittleness that suggests deeper insecurities. Rosie exploited this vulnerability masterfully, knowing that each joke would be met not with a good-natured chuckle, but with escalating rage. The contrast between teleprompter Trump and unscripted Trump was never more obvious than in his responses to Rosie. During prepared speeches, he appeared controlled and measured, reading words others had written with mechanical precision. But ask him about Rosie, and suddenly the facade cracked. He became frantic and defensive, unable to maintain the presidential persona his team had crafted. Behind the scenes, Trump's advisors reportedly pleaded with him to stop engaging with Rosie. They recognized what he couldn't, that each response only made him look weaker. Yet their boss, the man who commanded the most powerful military on earth, couldn't follow this simple advice. The comedian had found a vulnerability that no amount of political coaching could fix, a psychological Achilles heel that bypassed all his defenses. Those advisors were right to worry, because while politicians used fancy words and policy arguments, Rosie was busy loading her comedy shotgun with something far more lethal to Trump's ego. Her stand-up comedy background wasn't just a career choice, it was the perfect training ground for dismantling a man whose entire identity depended on maintaining a specific image. Unlike politicians who had to maintain decorum, Rosie could go places they couldn't. Her comedy toolkit contained specialized weapons that surgically targeted Trump's most sensitive pressure points. She didn't need congressional hearings or formal investigations. She had something much more powerful, the ability to make people laugh at him. Take her mockery of Horrible Truth Social, for instance. While news outlets debated the platform's business model, Rosie cut straight to the embarrassing truth that it was a desperate cry for attention from a man who couldn't handle being kicked off Twitter. Her characterization of the platform as a sad, failed venture struck directly at his self-image as a tech-savvy businessman. But Rosie's real genius showed in how she weaponized Trump's own words against him. She dramatically read his misspelled tweets aloud, letting his errors speak for themselves, while adding just enough commentary to highlight how ridiculous they sounded. The audience didn't need Rosie to explain why a supposedly brilliant businessman couldn't spell basic words. They got the joke immediately. Then there were the physical appearance jokes. While male comedians certainly took shots at Trump's distinctive look, something about a woman commenting on his orange complexion sent him into absolute fits. Rosie recognized this trigger and deliberately leaned into it, knowing exactly how it would make him explode. She understood something profound about Trump's psychology, that being mocked by a woman somehow magnified the humiliation in his mind. Even more devastating were her jokes about his TV ratings. For most politicians, being told their show had poor viewership would be a minor annoyance. But for Trump, whose entire self-worth seemed wrapped up in his perceived media success, Rosie's mockery of his ratings was like a dagger to the heart. She knew exactly what buttons to push because she understood the entertainment world they both inhabited. The Trump roast Extra Crispy became her most viral moment, a devastating takedown where she systematically demolished his failed social media venture while connecting it to his pattern of business failures. What made this particular roast so effective wasn't just the jokes themselves, but how she layered them with uncomfortable facts about his business history. People weren't just laughing, they were thinking, wait, that's actually true? Her methodology revealed Trump's most exploitable weakness, his complete lack of self-awareness. Most politicians develop thick skin and learn to laugh at themselves. It's practically a requirement for public life, but Trump seemed constitutionally incapable of this basic human trait. Each joke Rosie landed exposed this fundamental flaw, creating a feedback loop where his thin-skinned reactions only proved her point and generated fresh material. What Trump's thin-skinned meltdowns revealed wasn't just funny, it was clinically significant. Ever wonder why a group of psychiatrists actually broke their professional code of ethics just to warn America about his psychology? They published a whole book called Duty to Warn, because what they saw in Trump's behavior set off so many red flags they felt morally obligated to speak up. Professional consequences be damned. These mental health pros didn't just diagnose him from their couches, they risked their careers to officially label him a narcissistic, mentally ill person, completely unfit for leadership. The shrinks noticed exactly what Rosie had been demonstrating through comedy all along. While policy experts attacked Trump with facts and figures, Rosie was busy exposing something far more fundamental, a man psychologically incapable of handling even mild teasing without spiraling into rage. That's not just bad for TV ratings, it's terrifying when that same person has access to nuclear codes. Rosie's genius wasn't accidental. She understood that humor works as the perfect weapon against political posturing because it strips away the carefully manufactured image. When politicians attack Trump, he can hide behind policy disputes and partisan rhetoric. But when Rosie makes people laugh at him, that punctures the balloon of his self-importance in ways no congressional hearing ever could. Comedy wraps hard truths in humor. Rosie explained about her approach. While serious critics might bore audiences with detailed analyses of Trump's leadership failures, Rosie's punchlines delivered the same message but made it stick. The audience doesn't just hear the criticism, they feel it through laughter, making the message 10 times more powerful and memorable. What's particularly revealing is how this comedy crusade spread beyond just Rosie. Other comedians quickly adopted her techniques, creating a form of political resistance through humor that proved remarkably effective. Stephen Colbert, Samantha Bee, and John Oliver all developed their own versions of Rosie's approach, turning Trump's own words and behaviors into comedy gold mines. By making audiences laugh at Trump rather than fear him, these comedians systematically undermined his attempts to project strength and authority. Look at how differently Trump responded to political opponents versus comedians. When faced with serious political challenges, Trump would deflect, pivot to talking points, or unleash his legal team. But comedy? That triggered something primal. No team of handlers could prevent his 3 a.m. tweet storms about comedians who dared to mock him, proving Rosie's point that humor exposed vulnerabilities in him that traditional criticism couldn't touch. Perhaps most concerning was Trump's complete inability to prioritize actual governing over these personal comedy feuds. While facing international crises, economic challenges, and pandemic planning, Trump repeatedly diverted his attention to respond to late-night comedy bits. This bizarre prioritization reveals exactly what Rosie had been saying all along. His fragile ego always came before the country's needs. Rosie's most psychologically insightful observation might be this: humor terrifies Trump because it's the one thing he can't control or buy off. You can threaten critics, you can sue journalists, you can fire staff who disagree with you, but you can't stop people from laughing at you. And for someone whose entire identity is built around being respected and feared, becoming a punchline represents the ultimate defeat. When the dust settled, what did Rosie really accomplish? She didn't just get under Trump's skin, she revealed the blueprint for effective resistance through laughter. As Rosie herself put it, sometimes the best way to deal with a political circus is to become the ringmaster and turn it into your own comedy show. While serious journalists chased facts and politicians debated policies, Rosie was exposing vulnerabilities with punchlines that landed harder than any campaign ad. The genius of comedy isn't just entertainment value, it's truth-telling without the filter. Rosie's approach proves that when you make people laugh at power, you chip away at its foundation. Or as she recently noted, laughter really is the best medicine for dealing with Trump-induced headaches. Her comedy didn't just mock Trump, it provided the public with a different lens to see through his carefully constructed facade, accomplishing what endless political analysis couldn't, making his weaknesses impossible to ignore.